Welcome to Spinning Back Clique, where we take you on a quick spin through the week's big news in MMA. On this week's show, we're talking Paige VanZant, we're talking Nate Diaz, we're looking back at UFC Fight Night 184, and we're looking ahead to the main event of UFC 258. But guys, let's kick things straight off with a little bit of bare knuckle action. Paige VanZant came up short on her BKFC debut, but she lost a unanimous decision to Britain Hart on Friday night. She says she's sticking with bare knuckle fighting, but many think she'll be better off returning to the cage. How do you guys see her career progressing from here? We'll do 3 minutes to kick off, guys. And John, you can lead us off.
Yeah, it's an interesting question, right? Like, on the one hand, I'm glad that she's continuing to fight. You know, obviously she was briefly considering retirement, and I'd hate for her to do that, especially in kind of this one-off sport where she was trying something new. So I'm glad to see her redirected, refocused, and I believe her. I think she's going to fight on. We've seen how tough she is and how driven she is through her career, both in her performances in the cage as well as outside of it. You know, you think about some of the injuries and stuff like that she's bounced back from and fought through. So I think she will continue. How long it'll be with BKFC, I don't know, and I'm going to tell you why. My biggest concern is their financials. I'll just be honest with you. I mean, she clearly drove a ton of interest. We saw the traffic on her site. She is marketable as all get out. She gets fan interest. Even though some of them just want to hate, they're still wanting to watch. But are they willing to spend $40 to watch her compete? That's what I'm not so sure about. I'm super happy for her that she made this massive paycheck, even if it did come in loss. She said she made 10 times what she made in her UFC career. But that concerns me. Is BKFC, you know, recouping that on the back end? If they're not, it's going to be tough for her to continue down there. So I think she keeps competing. I don't know how long it's going to be in bare knuckle. Nolan, what do you think? Am I crazy?
No, John, you're not crazy. Welcome back into the mix. I missed you because that's a very level-headed take. I think people are sounding the alarms like, oh, you know, Paige, she failed out of the UFC and now she's going to bare knuckle and she can't win there. But I don't think it's really like that. I think you got to look at it. It's a different sport, right? So she's going to learn. She's going to learn the ways there. She's going to learn the techniques there. Sure, it's a little step back, but people are very interested, as we saw with our traffic this past weekend. People were digging bare knuckle FC, and I think that she had a big part, a big hand in the public interest. So for me, it's a step back. It happens. I think that, you know, if she gets a couple wins under her belt, you know, are people going to get reinterested in her again? Absolutely. I think people are always going to be interested in Paige VanZant. And especially somebody that's taken the journey less traveled, right? She's going into kind of uncharted waters. And who knows? I mean, like you said, maybe she won't end up with bare knuckle for that much longer. Maybe we'll see her go back into MMA with a different promotion, but the interest will be there. People will follow her. And I think one way or another, her combat sports career will continue.
I think her career is going to continue, but it's got to continue within mixed martial arts, guys. That's the bread and butter. Let's be honest here. The intrigue with Paige VanZant and bare knuckle was, what is she going to look like in that first fight when she takes a bare knuckle to the face, when she gets a cut, when she's bleeding? You see how much blood is involved in all this. We wanted to see what her reaction was going to be like. It wasn't, is she going to be the best bare knuckle of all time bare knuckle fighter? Is she going to have a long championship reign? Nobody was really interested in that. Now that that's come and gone, I think that interest is going to start to go away. So I think she needs to go back to mixed martial arts. And there's always storylines for Paige VanZant. Bellator, her husband fights there. How about them fighting on the same card? I mean, there will always be some kind of intrigue for her. But as far as bare knuckle goes, I think that ship has sailed, guys.
Interesting to see what happens next for PVZ. Back to the octagon, guys. And just when you thought the UFC lightweight division was crowded enough, a certain Nate Diaz has added a little more spice to the mix by getting involved in social media exchanges with Tony Ferguson and Dustin Poirier. Now, whoever Diaz fights, people are going to tune in and watch, right? So which man would you prefer to see him in the cage with next time he gets back in there? If it isn't one of those two, do you have another name? We'll do 3 more minutes. Nolan, you're up first.
This is an either-or question. It's pretty clear to me. I think Tony Ferguson versus Nate Diaz is the fight to make. As much as I love watching Nate fight, as pretty much I think everyone does, to me, I think to throw him at the top of the division right now and put him in a title fight would be blasphemy. I don't think that that's the fight to make, especially when you have top contenders like Michael Chandler, like Charles Oliveira chomping at the bit. Those are the type of matchups we should be looking at for Dustin, especially where he's a shoo-in for a title fight. So to me, Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson is the fight to make. Both guys need to up their stock a little bit more, I think, at least when it comes to divisional standings. Tony having lost a couple in a row. Nate not being very active, coming off a loss to Jorge Masvidal. That's a fight to make. If we're looking outside of that, I still love it. I mentioned this before. Nate Diaz versus Robbie Lawler at welterweight. Another fight that makes sense for both guys. Violence, name recognition. Let's book at UFC. Robbie Lawler, Nate Diaz. You heard it here first.
What needs to happen for it to be Conor McGregor? Is this not the best time to do this fight? Come on, look, here's what we need to do. We need to get Conor to be a little bit more gangster again. And this is the guy that's going to drag that out of him, and he's going to drag it out of Nate. They sell this fight perfectly. If this isn't the right time to do it, then when is? If you match him up against a guy like Poirier or something, I mean, that's just not the type of attitude you need on the other side of Nate Diaz. Tony Ferguson, I like that. That ain't bad. But why would we risk any more not getting this Conor McGregor fight? It's the perfect timing for it. I think that everybody's going to make money. But Nate Diaz, you got to take a fight soon, because if you don't, you're going to be proven what the UFC has proved time and time again, and that's they don't need you. If you sit on the shelves, that's where you might stay.
So interesting, right? Because when you talk about Nate Diaz, he can literally fight anybody in the division, anybody in a couple of divisions, and people are going to tune in. It's going to be a big fight. So I hate to say this, but I think a lot of what happens here is really up to Dustin Poirier. And I know Nate Diaz isn't going to hear that because he wants to be known as the guy calling the shots, right? And he is, of course. I mean, we've seen him get announced for matchups before and decide that he just ain't doing that anymore. So I guess he does call the shots in the way, but I think it's up to Dustin Poirier. And here's why I say that. I really, really want to see Dustin Poirier in a title fight next. I just do. I think he deserves a shot at that undisputed belt, man. He's worked so hard. You think about what he's gone through to get where he is. And yes, he's had the interim belt, but he said it, man. He wants to have one day where he closes the day as the world champion, number one in the world. And I think he deserves that opportunity. So for that reason, as you said, I guess if it's an either or type proposition, then I'm saying Nate Diaz versus Tony Ferguson, so that Dustin Poirier is fighting somebody for a title, and it can't be Nate Diaz, as was mentioned before. So I love that Conor McGregor, man. That trilogy fight has to happen at some point. It sounds like Conor McGregor is pushing for the trilogy with Dustin Poirier, but come on, let's do the Diaz one. All those things about being a gangster again certainly gets me excited. And I love that Lawler shot as well as an option for Diaz. So a lot of options on the table. I think it really all boils down to what Dustin Poirier wants to do. If he doesn't want the title and he wants the money fight, then let him have it.
Yeah, we just want to see the man back in the cage, right? Let's get Nate Diaz back in the octagon. Right, UFC Fight Night 184 this past weekend saw huge wins for Alexander Volkov and Corey Sandhagen, who both scored big finishes of Alistair Overeem and Frankie Edgar, respectively. Both guys are gunning for a title shot, but which one of the pair is going to get their opportunity first? And more importantly, will they be successful when they get it? We'll do 3 minutes on the clock, break it down. Goes, you can go first.
I think Corey Sandhagen for sure is the front runner here. You could sell a matchup against Zeus with that type of highlight reel knockout. You can put him up against anyone. That guy is the guy right now. If you look at what he has to battle, the championship fight between Aljamain Sterling and Peter Yan, let's just say, I mean, Yan doesn't really have that history where you could say, well, if he loses that fight, how could we not give him a rematch? That's not there. So he's sitting comfortably right now. If he were to go up there and it's Peter Yan that's waiting for him, tough matchup, but I think he can get by. Aljamain Sterling, yeah, I think he has chances, but we already saw that fight and we saw the way it went down. So for me to say absolutely he's got him, I don't think that makes much sense. So I think he is the one that is clearly in the driver's seat. Volkov, great performance, but hey, you still got to sweat out. What if Ngannou beats Stipe Miocic and there's a third fight there? There's a lot to sweat out there. It's Corey Sandhagen. What say you, John?
Yeah, I'd to be honest with you, I don't want to take anything away from Alexander Volkov, but I just don't know how you can go in any other direction. Corey Sandhagen laid it out and said, listen, I should be next for the winner of Yan and Sterling. And I completely agree with him. You know, he mentioned a couple names that are in there. You know, Cody Garbrandt's in the mix, of course, but he's saying he wants to go to 25, so let him make that move. TJ Dillashaw thinks he should come back and walk into a title shot. I understand his sentiment, but I don't think that's the right one. I think he's got to win at least one fight, you know, when you're coming back from a suspension the way he was. So for me, it's Corey Sandhagen. And listen, for Alexander Volkov, I mean, there's so many variables, as you said. I mean, and one of those variables, by the way, is Curtis Blades, who had a pretty convincing victory over him and deserves his opportunity. Plus, you got John Jones coming up in the mix as well. So, man, in terms of who's getting it first, I think at this point, Sandhagen's a guarantee for the next title shot in that division. So we'll see. As for who Mike could win, I'm not counting that guy out against anybody, man. That Sandhagen of the last two fights has looked like an absolute monster. I don't know what switched inside him mentally since that loss to Aljamain Sterling, but this dude is an absolute killer right now. And I like his shots against Yan or Aljamain. I want to see both those fights again, man. That'd be amazing fights. What about you, Nolan?
You know what? It's three of a kind. I got to go with Corey Sandhagen here, too. Heavyweights right now, man, it's log jammed, right? And we know if recent history has told us anything, we can't really predict timelines for the next title fight at heavyweight. I mean, Stipe versus DC was a fight that was delayed forever. And now Stipe versus Francis had taken a while to get off the ground, the rematch. So who knows what's going to happen down the line? Who knows how many delays we're going to be faced with? And you mentioned it, Curtis Blades, if he beats Derek Lewis, I think that's the next fight for sure. You got John Jones entering the mix at heavyweight. So there's a lot that can happen over the next year. And I don't think Alexander Volkov, no offense to him, that was a great performance. He's a great fighter, but I don't think that his resume stacks up to these other guys. Their momentum, the name recognition isn't there. So for me, I think Corey Sandhagen and at bantamweight, solidifying himself as a clear-cut next guy for Jan versus Sterling seems like what's going to end up playing out. I know you mentioned TJ Dillashaw, John, and that was kind of a topic of discussion with Sandhagen on fight night. So, yeah, I don't see him leapfrogging. I don't think it would be fair to the division, coming off of a drug suspension, having a long layoff. We need to see TJ compete. That's first and foremost. It'd be unfair to Corey in the division to do otherwise. So I think bantamweight is definitely a little bit more open, less logjam. And I think that will end up being, Corey will be the one to kind of put himself in a position for the next shot.
Overrunning a little bit, Nolan, but we're banging the drum here at MMA Junkie for Corey Sandhagen. How can you deny the man after those last two performances? Two of the best performances you will see in any weight division. That man deserves a title shot, and hopefully we will see that from him at some point further down the line. And finally, guys, we are back at the UFC Apex for UFC 258 on Saturday night. Kamaru Usman putting his welterweight title on the line against former teammate Gilbert Burns. So they know each other really well. They've been training on the mats together. But who's got the edge going into fight night this weekend? Will it be Ann Still or will it be Ann New? Break it down for us, guys. Final 3 minutes on the clock. And John, what's your pick?
Man, I am so intrigued by this fight, man, and for a different reason. The selling line is going to be the fact that they used to be teammates, right? I mean, that's the storyline that we get to throw out there and get people excited about, right? But for me, it's the stylistic clash between the two. I mean, you look at how dominant Kamaru Usman has been in his run, and it's his wrestling, and it's his cardio, and it's all those things that he can do. But you think about what you want to stop somebody like that. You want somebody that maybe has some power in their hands and can land one shot. Gilbert Burns can do that. And then you think, well, how do you counteract the wrestling? You want to have some incredible jiu-jitsu. Man, Gilbert Burns has that. So where is Usman going to feel safe in this matchup? Is he going to feel safe if he's on top, with that takedown? I don't think he is. Is he going to feel safe in the clinch? Boy, your limbs are still suspect a little bit there, so I don't think he is. So can he kickbox? Scary there too. It's a great matchup. I'm going to stick with Usman and Still. He's just that good, but I think this is going to be a great test of his run as a champion. I'm looking forward to it. Nolan, what do you think? And it's 3 minutes total, not just 3 minutes for you, my man.
Hey man, I'm fired up. I'll try to keep myself a little calm here on this one, but I'm going to actually disagree with you. I'm going to be a little contrarian here and say I think it could be, and it will be, and new on Saturday night. I think Gilbert Burns, his experience training with Kamaru could come into play here. But like you said, the stylistic matchup's interesting. I mean, Usman has faced a lot of guys that are kind of similar to him, kind of grinders, and he's been able to negate them on the feet. But with Burns, I mean, do you try to take him down? Like, what are you going to do when the fight hits the mat? And who knows what kind of knowledge Gilbert has about the maybe some weaknesses or some things that Kamaru does, some tendencies on the ground that may not be great. So for me, I think a lot of people are counting out Gilbert here, and I kind of like him. I kind of think when you start to sleep on the contenders, that's when one of the fighters ends up surprising everyone. So for me, I know I've done horrible on my picks this year compared to the last 2 years where I broke through and I made a statement. So maybe don't take betting advice from me, but I'm going to say go with the underdog, Gilbert Burns, and new.
Only because you brought it up. It's not the system. It's Tom Brady. He's the GOAT. No one, I've told you over and over. I'm going and Still. And it's because of Kamaru Usman himself. I'm not really putting too much into them training together because really when you look at both guys, you know exactly what they're going to do. You know what Kamaru Usman's going to do. Everybody's knowing what he's going to do. The problem is stopping it. He's so good at it that people can't stop it. Where Gilbert can threaten, I think, is he's just got to go submission crazy. If he gets put on his back, throw every submission he could possibly do to make Kamaru want to stand up. I think that's his only shot, is getting that fight back up on his feet. But really, when you think about it, Colby Covington gave Kamaru Usman everything he had, and it wasn't enough because Kamaru Usman is that good. This is nothing against Gilbert Burns. I feel like no matter who they put in front of him, I'm still saying, and still Kamaru Usman.
Goes, you just compare Kamaru Usman and Tom Brady?
A little bit.
Okay.
I was always a John Elway fan myself. But anyway, That's all we have time for on this week's show. You can follow the coverage of UFC 258 throughout Fight Week with our very own John Morgan and Ken Hathaway bringing you unrivaled coverage from Las Vegas. Keep it locked and stay right up to date with everything right here at MMA Junkie.